Hello, this is Jed Brewer with the Below the Line Club and Study Groups. Really grateful that you're on the call here today as we talk about better data sharing and streamlined internal systems. As we all look at our companies, we're likely experiencing pretty significant growth. It's an exciting time actually to be in the industry. Margins have been good, but there's been a lot of consolidation and other growth opportunities. And one of the things that often makes it challenging during periods of growth is the processes that we have and some of the systems that we have in place. And those are many times some of our biggest obstacles to fully realizing the potential of growth. So very excited that both Johnny Bertucci, who's president of RowLogic, and Ann Pitts, who's president of the Pitts Group, are here to talk with us about our processes and systems. And importantly, RowLogic and Johnny Bertucci are going to talk a little bit and help us answer the questions that can your data sharing practices be improved? So some things to think about. Are you sharing appropriate data across departments? Is your data kept in silos? Can your customers easily access their data? Are your systems sharing data with each other? So those are just some of the topics that Johnny Bertucci is going to talk about. And then Ann Pitts with the Pitts Group is going to help answer the question, is your company's growth sacrificing efficiency? What does inefficiency really cost your company? How do you empower employees to become key efficiency problem solvers? And how can you create an ongoing system of interdepartmental collaboration? So just some of the topics that Ann Pitts will be discussing as well. So a brief bit about RowLogic and Johnny Bertucci. Johnny, again, is the president of RowLogic, and their firm creates software solutions ranging from data integration and business analytics to web apps to mobile apps. They've been around for 30 years in the petroleum marketing space and have been improving communication processes and analytics for that time. And briefly about Ann Pitts and the Pitts Group. Ann founded the Pitts Group in 2014, and her mission is assisting petroleum companies to improve their credit and collection practices. And some of the results from working with the Pitts Group include healthier accounts receivable, improved cash flow, less bad debt exposure, and a refined process for credit management. So these guys know about processes, so really excited to have them on the call. We're recording this, so we'll send out the recording afterwards to you along with the slide decks that both Johnny and Ann share. We want this to be as educational as possible, so if you have a question, please type it into the GoToWebinar dialog box. I will be able to read that question and I can relay it to both Johnny and Ann at the appropriate time. Again, we do want this to be of value to you and as educational as possible. So with that introduction, Johnny, I'm going to turn it over to you to share with us a little bit more about data sharing practices and how we can improve them in our organization.
Awesome. Thank you, Jed. As Jed mentioned, my name is Johnny Bertucci. I'm president of RowLogic. We develop software applications for the petroleum marketing space. And we're asked to share a little bit about data sharing. Kind of today, most petroleum marketers, many are using the best in breed technologies. So you wind up with systems kind of all over the place. You have your accounting systems, dispatching, maybe some pricing programs, some fleet management tools. Back in the day before the internet existed, I was working for a petroleum marketer, and I remember the computer room. We had over a dozen servers with different systems on it. And so even now with the internet, cloud-based storage, et cetera, it seems like these systems just proliferate. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. You definitely want best in breed for the applications that are going to help you run your business. The challenge, of course, is that each of these systems tends to produce volumes of data, and that data can often be siloed and hard to share amongst different systems, et cetera. And so sometimes, analytics, collaboration, communication, is difficult when the data is siloed, and I want to just kind of spend a little bit of time talking about how we can share that data in some different ways. So I kind of want to talk about sharing data between systems, all your different tools you might be using, and also a different aspect of sharing data to share data amongst your employees and your departments. Sometimes an application may be, an example would be like a dispatch application is not necessarily shared with other departments, but there might be a use case or a scenario where that would be appropriate. And then lastly, with customers, can customers easily access their data? I'm kind of going to go through these kind of three areas because, again, as I mentioned, the data being collected, it tends to be voluminous. Accounting systems, et cetera, will get lots of data, but once you start putting fleet systems in there where you're tracking trucks along a route and collecting all the coordinates for that, and then pricing, et cetera. I mean, these data sets can go pretty large, and not only large in terms of the volume of data, but also wide in the types of data you're collecting. We're collecting order data, sales data, delivery data, loading data, locations, gallons, et cetera. And so we have not only, long volumes of data, meaning lots of data, transactions, but also wide in the sense of just disparate data, lots of different kinds of data. And so, I'm just going to take these in order and kind of talk a little bit about them. First one I was going to tackle was kind of among systems. If we have a lot of systems, a lot of times we wind up duplicating data entry into those systems. If you've got an accounting system, of course, you've got customers and customer numbers in there. And then if you have a pricing system, you're sending out pricing to customers, then you have customer numbers in there. And if you have a delivery system and you're delivering customers, you have a customer number in there. And a lot of times, if the same person is not setting up these systems, you wind up with either different customer numbers or different paradigms for how that number is entered, et cetera. But I also want to share a little bit, because nowadays, with all these systems coming into place, they know they need to talk to each other. And so they'll have these fairly robust ways of communicating. The buzzword, not the buzzword, but the acronym API, Application Programming Interface, most systems will have that. And we're going to kind of talk a little bit about how that can be useful when you're sharing data. Just have a screen here that kind of shows, you might, like the possibility of a different systems you might have, like, a pricing system. You might be taking orders in a different system, of course, delivery and a dispatch system. Most people have some accounting system where things are sort of connected together. And some sort of inventory. You probably got some tank monitoring going on, a point of sale system, and all these systems, in some sense, stand alone. But to the extent that the systems can communicate with each other, you really can have a lot of benefit in the terms of accuracy. Nobody's entering things in twice. You can also have benefit in basically process flow of, when data goes into one system, to have it flow into another system and have some event in a system push data into another system. And want to show you an example of something like that that we can do. This next slide here is looks a little bit techy, but I think you can kind of read it. It's basically, my title here is webhooks, APIs, JSON, and XML, a bunch of geek tech words. But what that allows these systems to do is to talk to each other. So this right here is just, I have two things. One, I have a webhook, and you can kind of see there, it's just a a URL. It's a website URL. It's a webhook. And then on the right-hand side looks like some, if you will, computer spit out of a fuel order. Well, all this shows is what this is the webhook is from a dispatch system. When a delivery gets made, when that delivery gets made and the customer signs, it's on an iPad or an Android tablet, and that the driver clicks submit on that form that a customer signed, that order is closed. And then traditionally, back when you were just doing paper, the paperwork would make its way back to the office. Somebody would enter it in and bill it. Or now it's like, okay, well, it's in a system, so somebody can run a report, get that data, and then type it into the accounting system. Or what I'm showing here is through this webhook and this API, that data can be sent to the accounting system real time. And so, the second that the order is closed in the field by, a customer signing and the driver pressing the submit button, that order at that same instant is in the accounting system as being delivered, ready to be billed. And if you have automated billing processes, then that order can be billed right then and there. Or go to a batch for review for billing, but nobody's entering the data in again. The data is, actually real time as it's happening out in the field. And so I have here, like, this is just a sample or an example of how a system may work, how a process flow could work. So I have, like, the first thing is an order. So there you might have an order system that's separate from your accounting system, either on a customer portal or on a salesman portal you might have. So somebody enters in an order. Well, what you would want to do is have that order directly flow into the accounting system. So the next thing is the order gets into the accounting system and goes through the accounting system checks of credit, of maybe allocation, some other things, whatever the accounting system would do with it. But then once it's released for dispatch in the accounting system, rather than an email being sent to the dispatcher or whatever, that order can automatically flow into a dispatch system where, it shows up ready to be dispatched. Then if the dispatcher dispatches it, again, rather than emailing something to a driver or handing the driver a piece of paper, the driver can get that order automatically on his tablet, go out, to the refiner or to the terminal, grab the fuel, deliver the fuel. Again, all of this happening electronically once the customer signs, again, back into the accounting system for billing. Now, this little scenario shown here, I mean, and there's 100 scenarios, but the idea would be to think, A, it's paperless, like nobody's touching any paper. Everything is real time. There's no delays in anything other than the checks and balances that need to go from somebody actually releasing something for dispatch or dispatching it to a truck, etc. But, and as we'll talk later when we talk about for amongst the departments, it's like, if these systems are available to the appropriate people in your company, then everybody knows exactly what's going on. And so that's just an example of how, if systems are communicating with each other, and again, they communicate using APIs and webhooks. If systems are communicating with each other, these things are, like, not only possible, but they're not super complicated. They're not crazy difficult to pull off. And nowadays, there's even, you might be aware of some of these, so like, this is, specific systems, accounting systems, dispatch logistics systems, asset management systems. But some of you may have heard of something called Zapier or If This Then That. Basically, those are online web tools that will help you link up different systems, and they have thousands upon thousands of systems that they link up to. But it's the same concept of, like, hey, I get an email and that can trigger something like to create an order, or the email can trigger, put something in a spreadsheet, etc. Just these tools nowadays are getting sophisticated enough, and in some sense, because they're getting more sophisticated, easy enough that we don't need to be doing double entry. We can be having systems talk to one another in an elegant way. And so that's kind of my first little, among systems, to share data between systems. The second area I was kind of going to talk about was sharing data among departments and employees. Again, the idea is to, those people who need the data to be able to access it for, one purpose is like a single source of truth. So there's not like, I'm looking here and you're looking there, and the data may not be the same. So if we're sharing the data, then everybody's talking from the same sheet. And then also I want to mention a little bit about analytics. Every program has reports and graphs and charts, but what if you could combine your systems and come up with some better analytics based on combining some of your systems. So I just have a slide here. You have all these different departments, and you as a marketer, each of these groups has a function doing their things. And I have an example, just one that is from a dispatch standpoint, but as I show it to you, I want you to be thinking about this graphic here. So I'm going to go to this page here, this is dispatching software. So it's a web-based, one scheduled orders on the left, scheduled orders on the right. But my point is not to point out the logistics, but to point out here's a dispatch software that used by the dispatcher, used by the driver of the truck. But when one of the purposes of this could be is for a customer service center or for an operations person. So imagine that a customer calls up and customer service center answers, and he's like, I placed my order 3 days ago. Where is it? Well, typically they would, well, let me call the dispatcher, and then may or may, be available. And then maybe the dispatcher is like, well, I wasn't the one on call that day. That was Fred. But if the customer service center had access to a screen like this, you would be able to see it's like, okay, well, the first 2 orders on this truck got delivered, the last 2 are not delivered. Let's assume this was Fast Fuel calling up, and you can say, hey, Fast Fuel, your order's next on the truck. The driver should be on his way. That kind of, and that could be extrapolated, obviously, oh, it's on Thursday, oh, whatever, it was already delivered yesterday. But all of that information is available visually and real time and easily to someone who would need it. And, basically the communication to the customer is infinitely better, and people are doing more what they need to do just by having this data available to them. That's just an example of sharing data between departments. And again, the examples are 1,000, but that was just one that caught my eye, because this software in a sense was developed with that in mind, so that other departments could use it and share it. Pricing examples, tank monitoring examples, there's others. The next thing I wanted to talk about, kind of it's sharing data among departments and employees, is less about, it's certainly among departments and employees, but it's more about having the data that is typically siloed. And, we talked about how the data, can go from one system to another. But here, what I'm talking about is how the system in these different silos can be combined or consolidated and actually present some information, some analytics, some actionable data. This is just, again, this is an example, but the idea is, this example here is pulling some sales data. So it's again, it's probably like pulling out of an accounting system and pulling out of some out of a delivery system. But the again, the charts and graphs are just an example. But if I have delivery data and like these, most people now are using either Samsara or Fleetmatics or PeopleNet or one of these things where they're, collecting data from the truck. That's again voluminous. It's a ton of data. And then you have, so some dispatching data, you got some accounting data, some sales data. To be able to put all of that together using something like Power BI or one of these business intelligence tools, or heck, it doesn't even have to be that. I mean, a spreadsheet, where you can get the data from these different systems and put them together, and again, this is like sort of kind of my point is like to be intentional about when you're setting up these systems. Make sure you use, common customer numbers. Make sure you use common product codes. If you're using product code ABC in your accounting system, use product code ABC in your dispatch system, and use product code ABC in your pricing system. Because if you do that, it makes stuff like this trivial and incredibly powerful. We do a lot of integration, and using hyperbole here, 90% of the integration is creating mapping tables between systems, because in this system you called it ABC, but in this system you called it ABC1 or something. Just the idea of intentionally thinking about, hey, I've got systems, I want to make sure these systems can talk to one another easily. And so that was again, like sort of an example with sharing data kind of within your departments and also together, so you can do some analytics with it. The last piece I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about was with customers. We have all of our stuff in the cloud mostly, and even if we don't, we can easily get some stuff there. Every customer's walking around with a smartphone, and so if one of the kind of things we can do these days is allow customers to get access to their data from our systems much more easily. Some examples, of course, would be pricing, orders, deliveries, drafts, and balances. I have again an example. The example I have here is just a customer portal, and so like this is a customer portal, but the the beauty of this example is the data is coming from various sources. So it's coming from an accounting system, it's coming from a tank monitoring system, it's coming from a pricing system, it's coming from a delivery system. And so all of this stuff coming into a portal for a customer where he can see his data, and get a sense of what's his balance, what's my pricing. I don't necessarily have to call. Now, obviously, some customers want to call, and that's their comfort level, that's what they want to do. But certainly newer and newer generations are just, hey, I got my cell phone, I want to go on my cell phone, see what my balance is. I want to go on my cell phone, see what my last order was. I want to go on my cell phone, see what my pricing is. And so again, being able to share that data with the customer electronically, via a portal, email, et cetera, whatever, however best to share that. That's a way of your company facing your customer, or your customer being able to see your company through an electronic data means. And sometimes, like I know customers, when they get this data too, they're also interested in being able to do analytics on their own data sets, if you will. And so something like a customer portal that allows, hey, you can download your pricing for the last month or year, you can download your last set of EFTs for the last month or year, to allow them to be able to do analytics and or connect it to their data systems. And so a lot of times, customers are using data that we send to them to automatically go into their data systems. So the extent that we can allow, or customers to get formats like CSVs, XMLs, etc. So like, that they can download and then push into their system, or even automatically go into their system. And we're doing a lot more of that lately too, where we'll give a customer a webhook or an API to call so that they can get data directly into their system without even having to go to a screen and download something. I don't know if that's making sense. So in summary, I have it's easier than ever to share data with other systems, internally and with your customers. Don't let silo data create poor processes of duplicate data entry, and ensure employees and customers can access the appropriate data. And I think if the data sharing is robust, you'll find a lot of what's the word? A lot of power in what people are able to do because they have access to the data, and also certainly your customers, but your employees especially. Like empower them to make decisions based on data that they don't have to go asking other departments for.
John, I asked the question early on, are you sharing appropriate data across departments? In your experience, what data is often most not shared across departments? It's the biggest opportunity for folks.
I think one is the example I kind of gave. It's like when a customer would call, like customer service centers typically have access to the accounting system, but not to other systems. And so a customer calls, what's my price? It's like, well, that was, your pricing, it was in a pricing system that was emailed to you, every day, but for whatever reason, they need it. It's like, well, if the customer service center had access to the pricing data, then they'd be able to answer the question without having to call the salesman or with, something like that. Orders being delivered, where is my order on a truck? Again, the customer might call the salesman will call the dispatcher. It's like, well, give the salesman access to the dispatch sheet, view only, of course. Like right now, everybody wants the Domino's pizza tracker for their customer. And so, it's probably a little bit, you need to think through that in terms of like delivering fuel, but we're now where, when a truck is ready for delivery to a customer, and, he can press a button and alert that customer he's on his way. That's customer, not interdepartmental, but those are the ones that come right to mind. I'm trying to think. Those are the ones I can think of.
Yeah, that works, Johnny. Yeah, thank you so much. And one final question. I mean, for people who are struggling perhaps with data sharing, one member asked an interesting question. I assume RowLogic can be contracted to help with this data sharing. Is that something that your firm does?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, we're a software developer, so that's what we do, but we haven't written an accounting system. I mean, everybody's using, PDI or PAMS or AIMS or whatever they're using, E3. But because of all of these ancillary systems, the back office, the best in breed trying to touch the back office, we've written a lot of, the word we use is middleware. An example would be, you've got a tank monitoring system. Well, I got somebody looking at the tank monitoring system, and I need to place orders into the accounting system. So they look at the tank monitoring, and okay, let me type in, this order, type in that order, type in this order. Or we wrote a middleware, we call it, where you're looking at the tank monitoring system, click which ones you want orders for. We know how much the tank can hold. We know, what the order is. We know when they're going to run out, all the tank monitoring information, and press a button and 100 orders get sent to the accounting system with the appropriate volumes, et cetera. And again, so it's like, that's a middleware piece. And the short answer is yes, we do that kind of stuff.
Okay. Well, yeah, thank you so much, Johnny. We appreciate you sharing with us here on data sharing and how important it is within our companies, particularly as we're in this period of growth. We're going to turn now to Ann Pitts at Pitts Group. And is your company's growth sacrificing efficiency? So, Ann, I'm going to turn controls over to you if you're able to accept them. But we really look forward to hearing about ways we can keep from sacrificing efficiency in this time of growth that we have. And I know you're going to discuss things like what does inefficiency really cost our companies, and how do we empower employees to become key efficiency problem solvers, more than just doers, but how can they be problem solvers? So Ann, I'll turn the floor to you.
Thanks, Jed. Hi, everybody. So glad to be joining you all on this Below the Line Club webinar. And today I'm going to do something a little different. Just so you know, Jed, I watch all of these webinars. I'm so interested in learning new things and pieces of the business that I might not touch a lot. And you always do, all your presenters do a great job on content. So my presentation today, it's not going to be quite as data driven, but I want to talk about something really important, and that's your employees, your efficiencies, and how you can really maximize the extreme strength that your employees can bring to this subject matter as your company grows. And I know that's a really tough subject, managing people. That's probably one of the toughest things you guys do with everything else that you oversee and that you take care of. And I really don't care what department you're in. When you think about what I'm going to speak to, I wonder who my audience is. And really, on this particular topic, it doesn't matter so much. It could be IT, sales, customer service. You all touch each other outside of your own area of the company. And what happens in one department flows down and creates efficiencies or inefficiencies in another department. So I'm going to talk about your people, and I'm going to share a method that I use successfully. This is something I do, and I know it works to help different departments work together to solve this kind of efficiency and communication problem that I've talked about. And at the end of my presentation, as a bonus round, I'm going to share a process your own customers might be using right now to obtain 45 days of interest-free money right on the back of your cash flow. Now, this is in today's environment of what, 7% bank prime, which is a really big financial picture change. So I'm going to cover that at the very end. So, okay, most everybody in petroleum marketing today is growing at a fast pace. It's been pretty amazing to me the last few years how you guys have just been growing like a weed. There was like hardly any slowdown when everybody else was upside down. A major side effect of fast growth is it does tend to decrease efficiency in many of the key areas of your business. And, let's all agree right up front, you guys have about 1 million things that are touching your efficiency in your business. Just so for discussion purposes today, I'm going to focus on, my favorite area, which is actually a huge area for measuring efficiency, and that is the order to pay part of the equation. So I promised I would cover these things: how growth impacts company efficiency, what does it really cost your company, how your employees can be your key efficiency problem solvers, and how to create that interdepartmental collaboration that's so highly important, as we go forward. I'm going to tell you too, some of these things I'm going to be talking about you might have heard before. But my question to you, and I really want you to think hard about it, what are we doing about this? Are we just hearing about it? No, it's in the background, but what are we doing about it? How are we focusing on the fix instead of just putting out the fire? So I work with petroleum companies, as you guys know, one-on-one. I go on site to meet employees, learn about the company, learn about their systems, and I find very consistent problems. It is not, it's different from company to company, but there's a lot of consistencies. And, today's growth mode I talked about with gallons just flowing out of your bulk plants and trucks. That's a great thing. But fast-paced growth can quickly overwhelm your overall efficiencies by stressing systems, and this is important, guys, systems, processes, and employee capacity to stay productive with the key elements of their job. You think about it, these systems have been in place, a lot of them, for many years, and they were not initially set up to withstand the type of pressure that this fabulous growth is bringing. And, you know, while this scenario is really frustrating to your staff and you feel that and you hear about it, I can promise you it's even more confusing and frustrating to your customers at times. And that really hurts. You don't want your customers to be frustrated like that. And so I think we can all agree high growth impacts efficiency, which greatly impacts your profitability. It doesn't make sense to become less profitable while you are becoming more busy. And that can be what's going on. So within your companies, it is hard to stay on top of all the moving pieces and parts. You add high growth through acquisition. In addition to the organic growth, it can just spin out of control. So one thing I wanted to talk about is, you know, what does inefficiency actually cost your company? And I can tell you that it's a lot more than you can even begin to add up. It's highly likely, if you have a project, you know, I'm sure you guys have done some of this, to start measuring identifiable dollars associated with inefficiencies, that dollar number is going to be double what you think it is. There are so many things that are really hard to quantify, like admin time. And while we're discussing, I'm going to just say company inefficiencies is kind of a throwaway phrase. When it's that much of a general speak, it's really hard to get down to things like the cost. So what you've got to do is you've got to drill down from there. What are the inefficiencies in transportation? What are the inefficiencies in that billing process? Go to these departments and start looking at the inefficiencies. You've got to look and measure for clusters that can be identified to you by your own employees. So that's something I want to bring up to you. Inefficiencies in your systems, they frequently involve what I previously mentioned, billing, invoicing, pricing, and those pool as unpaid invoices and past due accounts receivable in the credit department, and that the credit department is dealing with. So that's an example of where some of these clusters are going to show up. You know, also accounts receivable figures into several efficiency ratios, and the efficiency ratios have to do with AR inventory sales in some form or fashion. And I want to share a statistic from the Credit Research Foundation. I've talked about it before. It's a few years old, but I know for a fact it is still as relevant as ever today. And that is that 67% of past due invoices on your accounts receivable aging are past due because of a breakdown in your own system. So there you go. There's something to really get serious about. What are the breakdowns in my own system? Let that sink in. What would your cash flow look like with even a 50% improvement in AR? Think about what that aging looks like and what that improvement would look like. So I'm sticking up, this is this is protected on whose it is, of course, but you know, this guy's sitting here, he's got 86% of his AR is current. I think that's a pretty good statistic right there. But yeah, if you look a little further into the buckets, that's still over $1 million that are not in his control and in his own cash flow. That's a lot of money, and he's sitting there at 86%. What if you could turn that $1 million into a 50% improvement? I mean, it'd be amazing. So for our discussion today, I'm going to start with some common pain points that can happen as a result of these inefficiencies. We're talking about the order to cash area, and then I'm going to get to the solution. So your credit staff, I'm going to start with them. Some of these departments I go in, they spend an inordinate amount of time on email with customers, sorting out problems, resending invoices, answering all kinds of questions. Have you guys measured this? Do you know how much time your credit manager or other credit staff are spending on email? You know, there's measurement tools you can use to find out what it looks like, and I think it's worth taking a look at. This is a way for you to get down to some of this stuff that you're trying to just point out. Now notice, I did not mention spending time on email collecting. That's because if your staff gets totally consumed with sorting out problems, whether it's billing, pricing, they didn't get an invoice, whatever, collecting, and I can promise this is the truth, is the first thing to go on hold. The collections effort is going to be pushed off, and that's going to be reflected, again, negatively in that AR aging. So there's confusion. There's confusion as a pain point on who is supposed to be fixing. If you have all these problems that are being created when the order's being put in, and then the customer's on the phone with the credit department, well, the credit department's going to be highly involved in fixing, and is that really what should be going on? Common pain point, your credit and rebills. That's a huge thing that you can really put a number on. How many of these things are we creating? It is definitely frustrating your customers, and it is affecting your margins, I promise. Another pain point, connected departments, and Johnny touched on this, you know, billing, customer service, sales, they're all on their own island without good communication, without a lot of helpful feedback because they're so busy. They're not collaborating on how they can work better together in creating less havoc. So now we've identified some pain. Let's talk about how much more it costs you than you realize. Let's talk about some fixes and some things that you can do to fix. And the number one thing is you've got to seek out those root causes, not just the on-fire customer requests or other department requests, but what really caused the problem in the first place, and how do we go to that root cause to fix it? Do we need additional software? Do we need new modules, a new internal process, a new training procedure? From what I see, guys, right now, going into companies, training is absolutely huge. There are big gaps between the training that is offered and what your employees need to really understand what they're doing. So once identified, processes are put in place, the fixes are usually not huge rocket science to figure it out, but you've got to get people working together on it. So another thing it's important to identify as you look and get to the root causes is you've got to make the delineation. Is this a process systems problem or is it a personnel problem? Two very, very different issues. If it's a process problem, you know, a couple of questions would be to investigate how do we refine the process to execute successfully. If it's an employee problem, what additional training is needed, or really is the employee just not able to perform the duties of the job? They just don't have the needed skill set. So these are things you have to figure out as you get into this project. You know what's really the root cause of many of these types of problems? It is that really between the years, you know who knows the fixes for this, you know who knows what the root cause and what the problems really are. It's your employees in the trenches. They are living it every day. They know the system problems. They know the personnel problems. Don't expect the same opinion out of those you talk to, but talking about it is a really good way to determine the cause and the fix. And you have to be really good at asking the questions, and you have to be really good at listening to what they're telling you. So just like this picture, your employees are working away. They're not supposed to be talking about, you know, big picture items. They're doing their jobs. They're just trying to stay caught up, pretty much sitting together, but on their own little island. So quick story, I worked with a 60-plus-year-old petroleum company recently in a very high growth mode, operating with a lot of processes that had worked very, very well for them in the past. Now, you throw in some different software that they brought on that would really help with efficiency if it was used correctly. New employees without a lot of experience, and they are covered up. They are snowed up to their ears with orders. The newer employees were hired and trained to do specific things. They end up doing so much more than that. Customer service was working 50 hours a week to stay up with everything, heavily involved with orders, yet they weren't paying close enough attention to the little details that their system required, and a lot of the orders were not being processed correctly, which caused havoc for customers who were then calling the credit department, or even worse, the credit department was calling them about invoices that were now past due. So I'm talking to the CFO about this problem, and you know, they were all being sorted out by the credit department. He tells me we are working as fast as we can. There are a lot of manual processes here There will be mistakes made. It's just not that big a deal for the credit department to fix it. Well, that's probably true, but if you're spending 60% of your day off track of what you really should be doing, it is problematic. Just an example of how efficiency in one department trickles down to problems in other areas, and as Johnny mentioned in his system discussion too. So I have several golden rules that I preach about. Here's one of my favorites. He who creates the problem needs to fix the problem. And I'm going to use a kid analogy. In your home, would you ever let your 10-year-old tear up the playroom, make a mess, and then send the 12-year-old in to clean it up every time? No, you wouldn't do that. What's the incentive for one kid to do anything else but make the mess if he doesn't have to fix it? It is the same principle here. Okay, now I'm going to get down to this technique that I told you is a good fix. And I just wrote an article for the Below the Line Club newsletter describing this technique. It's not a quick, easy fix, but it goes a long way towards repairing a lot of these root cause problems, which we all know can be difficult to get to. I don't care, again, like I said, IT, financial, credit, customer service, I don't care what department you work in, this exercise works across the board. It is not just for departments that I'm using to illustrate the process. So here it is. Schedule a meeting for multiple departments. I think 3 at the most that are working together in a major company process that's suffering from inefficiency. For example, when you think about attacking the inefficiencies about invoicing, let's get together the invoicing guys, customer service guys, credit department. You heard me right. Get all those people, get all those departments in a room, face to face, not just the managers, but the majority of the staff in those departments for a full half day to flowchart the major processes of billing, pricing, and basic customer setup. This is not a 1 or 2 hour meeting. You are going to put them together and they're going to create flowcharts on the major processes. They're going to use sticky notes on a whiteboard, or you can use those Post-it pads. Then every individual in the room puts a little colored sticky dot on the problem areas in their opinion. You can even coordinate colors to help them get a clearer picture, like everybody in customer service uses yellow, everybody in credit blue, that kind of thing. But when you see those little dots clustered on a particular area of this flow chart, you're going to have a really good place to start the discussion about a game plan for fixing it, who's going to fix it, when it's going to happen. It becomes very clear, is this a procedure system issue or a personnel issue? So the game plan that employees create needs to be very detailed with dates, responsible parties, and the expectation for feedback as the projects go along. It helps to team a couple of folks that don't normally get together. Take a credit person, team them with a customer service person to manage and execute that one project in the game plan. It's not one and done. It's not a one and done exercise. There's going to have to be follow-up meetings. And again, not a flurry of emails going back and forth, but really tracking how that execution is going. So this really eliminates confusion as you dig down into whose job certain tasks really are. Most of the time when an employee is asked by another employee to help sort something out, and the response is, well, I don't have time, that's not my job. I really think people use that excuse not because they're dodging work or dodging being helpful, but they might not have the training and tools to actually do the task, and they don't want to admit it. So when we talk about this face-to-face problem solving and really getting together on the fix, this is the kind of information that can be revealed too. So this exercise can give you a game plan for improvement that can take months to execute, but lead to real fixes, not Band-Aids. And once the initial work is done, the follow-ups can be annual, and that's where you get into that ongoing benefit of department collaboration. I've seen companies that 3 years down the line, it actually becomes a fun event where your employees will look forward to it. Now, at the start of the problem, not so much. I wouldn't use the word fun. I wouldn't use the word good, look forward. But I will tell you right off the bat, probably the only real pushback you're going to hear is, and it's very valid, we don't have time for that. And that can come from your departmental managers. And I'm going to point out, no, they don't have time for it. But with the time saved by organizing an attack on inefficiency and departmental chaos, you don't have time not to do this. Do you guys remember a few years ago when Chipotle closed all their locations down for a full day to specifically address employee training? They didn't have time to do that, but they were having health department issues, or people were getting poisoned, but that's still, they closed it down. So, all right. I hope this description of the exercise that I've seen work very well has been very, very helpful to you. I want to remind you quickly 4 basic strategies to boost company efficiency. Build an effective team where employees truly understand set responsibilities. Streamline every work process you can and identify what's happening to interrupt that operational flow. Automate admin and repetitive tasks. Example, sending out an automated payment reminder 3 days after a customer goes past due can be very, very effective. Number 4, leverage technology and train relentlessly. Those are the major things that are really, really going to help this. So, all right, I am going to give you a bonus round, what I talked about at the very beginning of this talk, and how your customers might be arranging 45 days interest-free operating capital, and it rides on the back of your company cash flow. I'm going to give it to you an example. Tank wagon customer has 15-day terms, delays payment another 15 days without big problems. I'm going to go back and show you this aging right here. Now, this particular aging does something I don't necessarily agree with, which is starts on 1 day to 9 days. So if somebody's sitting in that 1 to 9 day category, I doubt your credit people are doing a single thing. I'm not saying they should, but if you have that automated dunning letter that goes out on day 3 or 4, a lot of your customers will pay before that next category opens up, which is the 10 to 29 bucket. You have a tank wagon customer that's sitting at 15 days. Again, I doubt your credit people are getting right on top of him. So he's not a lot of heartburn going in on that. Now, at 15 days, he's going to give you a call, and a lot of them are it's a growing number, as you probably know, are wanting to use their credit card, their corporate credit card, going to pay you off, pay the invoice. It buys him another 30 days to pay, totally interest-free, unless you are charging late fees on that 15-day payable and passing along your credit card processing fee. Your customer has arranged 45 days, actually 60 from the delivery date, as an interest-free payable. That is in today's environment of a bank prime at 7%. That's pretty good, I think. I know you guys don't get that kind of deal. So anyway, I just wanted you guys to be aware of that. And the things that you can do to fight back are automate that first touch, hoping to get people to pay, and recoup your credit card processing fee. If you're not doing that, you're really missing the boat on something. It's not an income stream, but it allows you to be recouped of a fee you shouldn't have to be paying. All right, Jed, guys, if anyone has any questions or comments or want to talk directly to me about anything, there's my info, and that's what I've got.
And thank you so much. Go back to your golden rule real quickly. I thought that was interesting that you had mentioned that analogy of your 10-year-old making a big mess in the room. And I think of us as probably leaders, would we ask our sibling or our son's sibling to go clean it up? The answer would probably be no, but might we as leaders or parents step in and clean it up for our 10-year-old? And, how often are we doing that? Not allowing the person that creates the problem to fix the problem. Often we justify it to ourselves that we're doing it out of service or out of love. But are we creating a culture of enablement, I guess, within our organization? So that just kind of came to mind as you were going through that.
I totally agree with you. And sometimes we all, as leaders in our company and parents, we do what's the easiest in the moment. And then it becomes a pattern. And, like I said, the one who's actually creating the problem has no incentive to do a better job.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a really good reflection there, Ann, and I appreciate you sharing all these tangible ways that we can improve, including those 4 strategies that we can work on implementing right away. Again, if anybody has follow-up questions for either Ann or Johnny, we'll send out their contact information after this call. encourage you to reach out to them with more. And just want to say thank you again for taking your time to be on this call. I hope you found it educational and were able to take away one or two nuggets that you can apply in your own business. In the meantime, happy Christmas and all the other holidays that are going on right now. Just wishing you and your families the very best as we celebrate this holiday season, and look forward to seeing you again in the new year. Take care. Goodbye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.